Three tools sit right next to each other on the color page: Hue Curves, Color Slice, Chroma Warper. They handle the same task, just not in the same way. Usually you reach for whichever one you remember how to use, but that's the wrong way to pick. Today we are talking about secondaries, specifically adjusting targeted hues. In this video I'll break down all three, what each one actually does, and exactly when to reach for it. For those new to the channel, my name is Vitas and I've been color grading music videos, short films and all kinds of client work in Resolve for over 6 years now. And I'm here to hand you the workflow tips I wish I had on day one. First, the oldest of the three tools and probably the one you've used the most. The Hue versus Hue curve lets you pick a hue and rotate it toward another. You click on a color in your image, 3 color points appear on the curve, you drag the center point up or down to shift that hue. Simple, fast and familiar. But there's something happening under the hood that most people don't think about. The Hue versus Hue curve is a flat line representing a circular wheel. Hue is 360 degrees, it wraps around. But the UI shows it as a straight horizontal graph, which means you can't easily see what you're actually pushing toward. And that creates quite a problem. When you rotate a hue too far past its nearest neighbor on the wheel, you can literally see on the vector scope two vectors colliding, gradients breaking down. And the curve UI gives you no warning is happening. It breaks gradients and introduces unpleasing banding. The fix is to watch your vector scope while you work. Broad adjustments tend to give you much more pleasing results than narrow ones. That's why I use this tool for wide, gentle moves, shifting a background element that's slightly off, nudging a sky towards cyan or blue, or dialing in skin tones using the built-in red and yellow color vector presets. I usually don't go narrower than the default preset suggests. And to check if everything sits where it should, I reach for my nailer DCTL and make sure my skin tones have separation and don't have unnecessary color casts. Push a hue curve too far and your image will tell you, usually not in a good way. And the moment you need more aggressive move or your footage is compressed 8-bit H.264 heavy codec, you are going to feel the limits of this tool fast. Less color information means less room to push before things start to fall apart. Next tool on the line is Color Slice. This one is much younger, introduced in Resolve 19, and it does something none of these other two tools do. Color Slice divides your image into 7 zones: red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, magenta, and a dedicated skin tone control. Each zone gets its own center, hue, saturation, and density slider. Now before we get into what makes this tool shine, let's be honest about what it can do. All 7 vectors are fixed. You can't adjust the fall-off between zones, you can't widen or narrow a selection, all you can do is shift the center point. What you see is what you get. And that skin tone zone, it sounds useful, but in practice the vector is too narrow for reliable skin tone work. The remaining 6 vectors are also limited for wide hue shifts. But here's where Color Slice is actually quite useful. Most saturation tools in Resolve are additive. You push saturation up and brightness goes up with it. The colors get more intense, but they also get lighter and look digital. Color Slice works subtractively. When you push saturation, brightness doesn't follow. The color gets richer, deeper without going unnaturally bright. And just take a look how different this feels compared to a standard hue versus saturation curve. On paper, hue versus luma and density should do the same job, but take a look at the results. The density slider darkens the selected color range more evenly across tones. Hue versus luma does a similar thing, but more gradually and with less impact on the highlights. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, they simply work differently, and I'm fairly certain they operate in different color models under the hood. Worth noting that saturation and density sliders at the top of the tool work across the entire image as well, not just individual zones. So you can do a broad density pass and targeted hue adjustment all in one node. When do I reach for it? When I want density and richness fast across specific hue zones or across the whole image. And now we get to the newest one introduced in DaVinci Resolve 20, the Chroma Warper. Instead of a curve or fixed vectors, you draw strokes directly on the chromaticity diagram. Think of it of a map of all colors in your image, and you are drawing arrows that say, take this color, move it here. You sample a color, either by clicking directly in the viewer or the diagram itself. your source point appears. Then you drag it toward your target and a second point appears connected by an arrow. That arrow is your warp, showing exactly where that color started and where it's going. Now there are two modes, and understanding the difference matters. Normal mode moves a range of colors smoothly from one place to another. It's great for broader shifts. Point-to-point mode isolates one specific color and sends it directly to another, without dragging everything in between along with it. That's the move you reach for when you need to change a specific color without it bleeding through intermediate hues on its way there. And if something you don't want to move starts shifting anyway, you drop a pinpoint on it. That locks that color in place and keeps it untouched, regardless of what else you are warping around it. Each stroke has three parameters worth knowing. Chroma range controls how wide or narrow the stroke selection is. Exposure adjusts the brightness of the target color, baked right into the warp itself. And tonal range, with its low, high and pivot sliders, lets you restrict the warp to specific brightness zones within that color. So you can push only the midtone and leave the shadow and highlight exactly where they are. And this is what I do most of the time with this tool. That last point is what separates this tool from everything else we've looked so far. The other two tools affect a hue across the entire tonal range. The Chroma Warper lets you get inside that range and work specific zones of a single color independently. When do I reach for it? When I need a precise targeted color move that has to survive upstream changes, or when point-to-point isolation is the only way to get from one color to another. And thanks to my friend Vladislav, I found it very useful to push some color tones into more neutral backgrounds, which makes it great for creating creative looks on your image. Another great way to use Chroma Warper is for creating oil paintings and selling them on Etsy. Okay, jokes aside, one thing that affects all three of these tools equally: the result you get from any hue manipulation depends heavily on the footage you are working with. 8-bit H.264 from a consumer camera and 12-bit B-roll from a Blackmagic cinema camera are not the same thing to push around. The more color information your footage holds, the more room you have to move before things start breaking down. 8-bit gives you 256 steps per channel, 10-bit gives you over 1000, 12-bit over 4000, and 16-bit we are talking 65,000 steps per channel. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between a clean, smooth hue shift and banding you can see across the room. A lot of the time it's not the tool that's the problem, it's the footage asking you to be more gentle with it. And if you want to go even deeper on the hue manipulation, there are some third-party tools worth knowing about. A free DCTL called Tetra, built for smooth hue work and very nice for look development. Worth having in your toolkit just to understand a different approach to the same problem. And if you want to explore some paid options, mononodes and iridescent color both make great professional-grade DCTL plugins for Resolve. Worth exploring if this kind of work is a regular part of your process. To finish it up, the wrong tool for the job doesn't mean a good result is impossible. It just means you're working harder than you need to. That's it for now, and if you want to see how I balance shots and check my skin tones using my Nailer DCTL plugin, go watch this next video.